Good morning, and welcome to our first meeting of this term for Brampton's Audit Committee. We'll start with attendance. Vice Chair Vicente.
Present.
Councillor Paleshi. Councillor Brar.
Present.
Councillor Tour, who I believe is on his way, just stuck in a little bit of traffic. Next we have the approval of the agenda. Does any members wish to add any business item to today's meeting? Seeing none, no one online. Okay, so we have a motion moved by Councillor Paleshi to approve the agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that carries. Declarations under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Do any members have a declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for any matter to be considered on today's agenda? Seeing none, the clerk will so note for the meeting minutes. On to consent. Committee, as part of the consent motion process, I will read each agenda item that is subject to the consent motion, and any member may verbally identify an item to be held for debate during the meeting. Any item not held for debate will be considered as part of the consent motion and voted on for approval. I'll start by reading the relevant agenda items, and members can identify any items to be held for debate. So we're going to hold 5.1 and 7.1 because of delegations from KPMG. 5.2 and 6.5, staff presentation and report, claims management audit. 5.3 and 6.6, staff presentation and report, limited tendering audit. 5.4 and 6.7, staff presentation and report, parks maintenance audit. I'll hold that for the presentation. 5.5 and 6.10, staff presentation report, health and safety audit. We do have a hold for 5.6 and 6.11 for a staff presentation report on the user fee audit. That's going to be held for 11 a.m. For an expert to answer questions. 6.1 and 8.1, staff report for the update of the internal audit charter and audit committee terms of reference and discussion item at the request of myself regarding citizen members on the audit committee. Hold. Councillor Paleshi, hold. 6.2, staff report regarding corporate fraud prevention hotline 2022 yearly update. Hold. Staff report status of management action plans for Q4 2022. 6.4, staff report for the 2023 audit work plan and 2022 status update. 6.8, staff report driver certification program fleet and fire and emergency services compliance audit. 6.9, staff report driver clarification program transit compliance audit. 11.1, open meeting exception under section 239(2)A of the Municipal Act 2001, the security of the property of the municipality, a corporate infrastructure matter. Hold. Councillor Vicente. 11.2, open meeting exception under section 239(2)A of the Municipal Act 2001, the security of the property of the municipality, a corporate infrastructure matter. And that will be in consent. The clerk will summarize those items held by members for consideration or not part of the consent motion prior to the approval of the motion.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to members of committee, the following items will be held. 5.1 and 6.1 held for a delegation. The delegation from KPMG and the associated report, the 2022 audit planning report. Item 5.4 and 6.7, which is a staff presentation and report regarding parks maintenance audit. Item 5.6 and 6.11, which is the staff presentation and report regarding the user fee audit. That's held down for an 11 o'clock time start. Item 6.1 and 8.1, a staff report on the update on the internal audit charter and audit committee terms of reference and discussion at the request of Chair Keenan regarding citizen members on the audit committee. That's held by Councillor Paleshi. 6.2, a staff report on the corporate fraud prevention hotline 2022 yearly update. That's held by Councillor Paleshi. And finally, 11.1 in closed session, the open meeting exception under Section 239(2)A of the Municipal Act, security of the property of the municipality, a corporate infrastructure matter. That's held by Vice Chair Visante, with the balance of the agenda business being approved as part of the consent motion if it carries.
So just to clarify, you said 5.1 and 6.1, it was 7.1.
7.1, my apologies, yeah, 5.1 and 7.1, yeah.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Tour to approve the consent motion. All in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. The next item is 5.1, a delegation from KPMG LLP, Chartered Accountants regarding item 7.1, the 2022 audit planning report. Welcome, Maria and Susan.
So just be Maria.
Just Maria. Well, welcome, Maria.
Good morning and thank you for having me here. Somebody's supposed to put up the presentation. So while they're doing that, I'll briefly go over the purpose of our presentation today. So we come and present two reports to the audit committee. The first one is the report that we have today, which is the audit planning report. So this goes over some of the key aspects of our audit plan. And then once we're done the audit, we come back to you with our audit findings report. So in the interest of time and taking this report as read, I'm not going to cover all the detail that's included in here, but perhaps I'll cover some of the key items only. So with that, if we can move to page 4 of the report, this is required communication from the firm, just to emphasize and communicate how important audit quality is to KPMG and how we uphold the highest level of audit quality through our audits. There's a link to transparency report on the top right corner, so if you have some time, please do take a look at that. With that, we'll move on to page 7 of the report, which is materiality. So materiality is an important concept for the purposes of the audit. We use materiality for planning and scoping the amount of work that we're going to perform on different areas of the financial statements, and also to evaluate any audit adjustments that we find as part of the audit. We come up with a planning materiality at the beginning using the planning information that we get from management, and then we assess and evaluate again towards the end when we get the final information from management. On page 8, we've provided you with some of the numbers that we've calculated. So materiality for the consolidated audit of the City of Brampton is calculated as 21.2 million, and the audit misstatement posting threshold is just a little over $1 million. So this audit misstatement posting threshold is the most important number that I want to highlight to this committee in terms of the amount that we note as the threshold for bringing adjustments to you. But if we find any adjustments that are lower than this amount and they're unusual in nature, we still bring them to you. So please don't think that this is, set in stone in terms of the threshold. With that, we move on to page 10. So that's our group audit scoping. Group audit essentially means that the City of Brampton is a consolidated audit, so it includes other entities, including library and the BIA, and we consider that as a group of entities. And what we're saying really on this slide is that we have very good coverage in terms of how much work we perform before we issue our audit opinion on the consolidated statements. On page 11 and 12, we cover our presumed fraud risks. So these are not specific to the City of Brampton. These are prescribed by the Canadian auditing standards. We're required to perform them on all of our audits. The first one is related to revenue recognition, and we limit that based on understanding of municipalities. We limit it to any revenue that is recognized from deferred revenue into revenue. The second one here is management override of controls, and this is considered a fraud risk due to the unique position that management is in to be able to perpetrate fraud. There are set procedures that we cover to address this fraud risk, and they're outlined on page 12, and they include testing of journal entries, performing retrospective review of any significant estimates, and if there are any unusual business transactions, we do look into them with a little more detail. With that, we move on to page 13. So page 13 to 17 cover our other areas of focus, and provide you with a highlight of some of our key procedures. Just to give you an understanding of the type of audit procedures we perform, this is not meant to be a comprehensive list, but just to give you an idea. I won't go into the detail of these. I'll move on to page 18 next, which highlights our timelines for the audit. These timelines have been discussed with management, and management has taken into account the audit committee timelines in here as well. Okay. And that takes us into the appendices, and I'm not planning on covering the appendices, but there is a lot of useful information in there, so please do take a look. Some of that information is related to new auditing standards, new accounting standards, and some current topics and insights as well. With that, I'm here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Maria. So can I just join them together here instead of do it all at the same time? Okay. So committee, we now have item 7.1, a staff report titled 2022 Audit and Planning Report. Do any members have any questions or comments regarding the report? Any online? No, seeing none. Okay, thank you so much. So we have to do both together now. Yeah. I have a motion moved by Councillor Vicente to receive the delegation and receive the report. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. That brings us to 5.2 was in consent. 5.3 is in consent. So it's to 5.4. Our next item is 5.4, staff presentation regarding the parks maintenance audit. And we also have the related staff report, item 6.7. Presenting today, we have Claire from Internal Audit.
I will let Brad to present.
Pardon me?
Brad, my audit staff will be presenting.
Okay.
Yeah, from here.
So,
He's going to be presenting from here.
All right,
welcome, Brad.
Thank you, and thank you, Claire. Yes, this is the park maintenance audit. Thank you for putting up the slides. Next slide, Peter. So just in terms of a quick background on this audit, park maintenance is a division within the Park Maintenance and Forestry Division. They maintain all parks, sports fields, and boulevards, and some of their main activities include grass cutting, sports field maintenance, turf maintenance, recreational trail maintenance, emptying garbage bins, park inspections, and responding to internal or external 311 service requests. The 2022 operating budget was approximately $11 million, and the total value of park assets is approximately $518 million. Our audit focused on park maintenance activity from January 2020 to June 30th, 2022. Next slide, please. The engagement aimed to determine whether proper oversight and controls were in place for park maintenance activities and to assess if current processes were designed to optimize service delivery. The audit assessed whether standard operating procedures were in place and current, if maintenance activities complied with city bylaws and legislative requirements, if park asset inventory records were accurate and properly maintained, if park maintenance activities were appropriately scheduled, performed, and tracked, if contracts with outside vendors were in place and monitored for compliance, if systems were being fully utilized to enhance the efficiency and transparency of park maintenance operations, and to determine if park maintenance activities align with the city's overall strategic direction. The first finding was with regard to standard operating procedures. It was found that some standard operating procedures were not in place or were outdated for some processes. So lack of standard SOPs for some core activities, including grass cutting, garbage pickups, sports field maintenance, and playground inspections. There were also other existing SOPs that were in place but have not been updated for over 10 years. The second finding was with regards to grass cutting inspections for grass that was contracted out to outside vendors. The park maintenance guidelines require staff to inspect 100% of contracted out grass cutting activities within a day of the cut. Our review of records of grass cutting inspections for May 2022 noted that city staff inspected approximately about 81% of all grass that was cut. Of that 81% of grass that was inspected, there was found to be delays between when the grass was cut and when the actual inspection took place, with the average being 7.7 days, and the time between the actual cut and the inspection ranging from anywhere from 1 to 15 days. Next slide. Finding number 3 was regarding how the staff tracked new grass areas. So all grass areas cut by contractors are tracked in an assignment sheet, and all additions of grass areas are approved and recorded in an added hectares document before being added to the assignment sheet. Contractors are paid based off of the total hectares in the assignment sheet. We compared the assignment sheet and added hectares document for one of the areas and noted that since 2020, 11 new grass areas have been added to the added hectares document, whereas 12 new grass areas had been added to the assignment sheet. So the unrecorded grass area was found to be legit and approved. However, it wasn't added to the assignment sheet. So the recommendation there is going forward to conduct a reconciliation between the two documents, just to ensure that any added hectares to the assignment sheet that are being paid for were properly reviewed and approved. Next finding was with regards to the records of park assets. We reviewed the life cycle tracker as well as conducted physical counts of park equipment at 10 parks and noted that the city's records on small park assets, such as player benches, park benches, and bleachers, are not always accurate. 8 out of the 10 parks we conducted physical inventory counts at showed discrepancies between the actual equipment in the park and what was showing in the records. The other observation was with regards to the listing of flower beds. The listing of flower beds are classified as either non-irrigated or irrigated and have a total amount, but are not listed by park, making it somewhat difficult to confirm the existence of the flower beds. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and you actually skipped to finding number 5. Thank you. Finding number 5 was with regards to tracking of park maintenance equipment. We selected 10 fleet assets and 10 small engine assets for a physical count. With the assistance of Parks Operations, we were able to locate all the items. However, the items are manually tracked on a master spreadsheet, and we found that the information showing on the master tracking spreadsheet is not always accurate. Some of the things we found was an instance of the manufacturer information not being accurate. The manual master spreadsheet also showed 2 different assets with the same unit number. One of the assets we physically located was showing as missing on the master spreadsheet. And we also found inconsistent tracking of items over $1,500. Some being tracked in the M5 system, while others were tracked exclusively in the manual master spreadsheet. Okay, we can forward to finding number 6, please. Thank you. Finding number 6 was with regards to service requests, and the status of service requests is not always up to date. Any park issues or deficiencies observed by Brampton employees or residents can be reported through the city's 311 system. A service request is created at that point for all reported issues and tracked via the software system used by Parks Maintenance, which is called CityWorks. Our review of these open requests in CityWorks noted that a number of service requests that have actually been resolved were still showing as outstanding in CityWorks. So the discussion and the recommendation was with regards to conducting periodic reviews of open service requests going forward. Last one, thank you. The last finding was with regard to vendor performance evaluations. There's a procurement SOP which requires vendor performance evaluations to be filled out for all service contracts over $100,000. At the time of the review, this was September 2022, we identified all vendors with contracts over $100,000 and found that there was all four grass cutting vendors had contracts over $100,000, ranging from anywhere from $535,000 to $1.1 million. At that time, staff had not completed a vendor performance evaluation for any of the 4 vendors. So the recommendation there was going forward to ensure that the procurement SOP is adhered to. That concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad, for the presentation. We do have questions, so I will go to Councillor Vicente.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Brad and staff, for the presentation. Having been on council for almost 5 years now, can certainly tell you anecdotally that I agree with the findings of this report. Members of council, myself, and Councillor Santos in Wards 1 and 5, we often get calls from residents, asking, why has the grass not been cut in the park across the house from on my street? And so, in terms of process, now that we have this information here before us, what would be the next steps, and what does staff require from this committee in order to make the necessary changes so that we're not continually experiencing these types of issues from happening?
Through the chair, I'll take that question. And in terms of the audit, and I agree with you, I don't disagree with any of the findings as well. The biggest issue, and I had parks for about 6 months last year. Parks in the city of Vaughan have grown over the last 15, 20 years tremendously, because we are one of the fastest growing cities in Ontario. However, the parks budget and the parks staff really haven't kept up. That's number one. In terms of going out and using more contract services, which is what they did to offset those resources, but they never put a system in place to monitor and track those contract services. So in my short time in parks, in working with Ed and his team, we've actually put together a new structure in parks, and we're going to start to build those resources back up. And moving forward, all of those recommendations will be addressed. The first step is to approve phase 1 during our budget.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Chair. So, for example, when looking at just inspections, like how many inspectors do we have today, and how many would we need in order to be able to keep up on checking that the work is being done by contractors?
Through the chair, in terms of contract inspections, I can tell you in my time that we only had 2 staff inspecting, because there was no contract administration area. With the new restructuring, we've actually added that section now.
All right, and so when, so through budget process, we already have some changes happening?
Yes.
Okay, and do we need to do more changes? Do you need additional direction from us here at committee? Through you, Chair.
And through the budget process and trying to be responsible as well at the same time, we've actually put it through as a phase-in process. So phase one would be this upcoming budget, and phase two would be the next budget. And if we're looking at trying to make all those changes, I don't think it's realistic that we can make all those changes in just one cycle. So I think if we get the approvals moving forward with the first budget cycle, and then by the second budget cycle, I think we'd be up to par.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. No further questions.
Thank you, Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What's the M5 system?
Ed can probably explain better than me, but the M5 system is an asset tracking system. It was used for all assets, from my understanding, when Parks was part of Public Works. Since that transition, it's been kind of a hybrid approach to tracking assets, with some of the assets being tracked in M5 and other assets being tracked through a manual master spreadsheet in Excel.
Would the M5 system be, sounds like it's kind of piecemeal and old. Would it be some of the problem?
It absolutely, you're correct. It is an older system. It is preferable, however, to tracking the assets manually. So as kind of a minimum, the recommendation was to begin, tracking assets exclusively through the M5 system. But yes, the M5 system is old and would not be considered, modern or best practice.
Any recommendations on looking at a new system, or do we currently have any other systems that we use at the City of Brampton, like for some, maybe the vehicles or something, that we could transition over to?
That's a great question. I believe that all the city uses the M5 system. It's definitely something worth looking at. I think it would involve the buy-in of a number of different departments, different divisions. So I think it's a good recommendation, and it's probably something that could be looked into.
Is there another system in Brampton, in the city, that we use for tracking assets?
Not that I'm aware of.
Fire uses the same system?
The M5 system, I believe so.
Okay.
But I can get back to you with that information, though.
What does it mean, or walk me through how a generator went missing? Walk me through kind of how that would happen.
Through the chair. Thank you for the question, Councillor Paleshi. Going missing, I think, as Brad had stated, we have a manual process for tracking all our assets, which is really an Excel document. To add to that, we've introduced, this audit was done in August. We have been working, good or bad, the M5 system is a system, so we're implementing all our pieces of equipment into that system currently. Going missing is we have certain areas of the city, districts for instance, and they'll have their own allocated equipment. So not that it went missing, but it might not have been in Ed Fagan's bucket today because it was loaned to Jim Pittman, for instance.
Right.
And so going through this process, but then looking is because someone needed it that day or that week, being moved around the city.
I assume the crews that we have that are out there have a lot of our assets that are strictly for that crew. They walk every day with their quick cut or whatever machinery. A generator, though, is something that we wouldn't want every crew to
Correct.
have. And it would be back and forth. So it was just borrowed but not tracked in terms of.
Correct. An example would be a special event, for instance, that weekend. Most of our generators tend to be with our construction group, being loaded out to one of the districts, and just that process of signing in, signing out. And the four persons would have it, understanding where it is, but that process piece, and that's getting to the M5 system as well, having data in, data out.
Does that M5 system have that capabilities now?
I believe as an ownership-wise, yes, then each area of work will know what they own, and then minimum monthly inspections, actually weekly inspections are done, just a quick visual, then looking, as you said, quick cut saw to mowers and such. Using the mowers as an example, if a mower goes down in a certain area and grass needs to be cut, then that mower can be moved over to a different district as well.
Okay. Going to you look at this and like Councilor Vincente, you're 100% right. How many times have we called to say, if I called you, Ed, this hasn't been cut in a while, or we have residents that are asking for these. What do we do to go back to the contractors? Have you identified any of the back charges or not efficiencies, but any of during the audit, did you identify that the grasses that weren't being cut did get resolved, those issues, through way of contractor by back charge or by the contractor going back out there to rectify the problem?
We didn't come across anything like that. We weren't able to specifically observe any specific examples where grass was supposed to be cut and was not cut. The main driver behind the grass cuts is there's a defined schedule of, I believe, 12 cuts a year. We ensured that those 12 cuts were completed in 2021 and we're on pace in 2022. Our audit, most of the emphasis was on what we could control, which was the inspection of the grass cuts. So with a delay between when the grass is actually cut and the inspection, it's very hard to tell, a week or 2 weeks after whether or not the grass was cut properly or even cut. And that was our main takeaway from that process.
And are we confident that, Marlon?
Through the chair, if I can add that comment, in receiving a lot of calls about grass not getting cut and reviewing the specs, what I found in looking at the specs, we have a start date of when you start that rotation cut. What's missing is how long you have to finish that cut in the rotation. So the contractors that bid the job and get it, in my opinion, don't have enough crews to start and finish it. So I think our specs need to be cleaned up to add a time period as to when you start and you finish it. So what's happening is they'll start the cut in several areas, but don't finish it. So they meet the guidelines of the specs. And because we're missing that duration, you're able to actually do that, which is why inspection is needed, and we also need to clean up our specs.
Mm-hmm. And you're confident that, that our contractors, that, all those times that you get calls from residents, and you get calls from counselors, you're confident that the contractors are going back to rectify the problem if they are skipping cuts in any way, because, the one time that I called you on Richvale where they clearly hadn't cut the grass in weeks, obviously they missed a day. So, how is that rectified?
Oh, correct. And as Marlon had stated, the start dates and such, if it happens to be a 7 or a 10 day, there's been some inconsistencies at times when that next cycle starts. So in the perfect world, first is 10 days later or 15 days later. Ideally, that vendor should be starting in the exact same rotation. If they're not, then there's more of a delay. And correct, Councilor Pellecci, as you stated, some of them are self-explanatory if they haven't missed. Some of them inconsistency tend to be, school board or commercial property, and it tends to be just that little strip.
Confusion.
But by the second or third cut, it's pretty noticeable. With more inspections, of course, that will help. And just to let you know, some of these are the detailed documented inspections. So there is people are watching, out there inspecting, but having dedicated people is important. Correct, additional inspectors.
And we'll get to that in budget.
Yeah.
Claire, did you?
If I may add to the point, and just to add to Ed and Marlon and also Brad has said, the main problem with this is because we're not doing reinspection immediately right after the grass cut. If we leave between 1 to 15 days, and on average 7 days to go back to see the grass cut, you don't know whether the grass has been cut in summertime. That's the thing. So if we could make sure we implement the recommendation and going back to check the grass cut immediately after the grass cut within the next day or two, and then we can then address with the contractors that you have not cut. Otherwise, we don't even know whether they've been there. So that's, I think, the main issue. So going back to what Marlon was saying is, if you only have 2 staff, let's just say one of the staff is sick, they're not going to be able to cover all these inspections. In order to cover the inspections, you need to have plenty of staff, and then you can address kind of the behavior right after that.
But that's the balance, right? So
It is.
obviously 2 is not enough. And I would say, like, you know, if we're getting heavy cut months, you know, in the spring and again later on in the fall, you know, 1 for wards 2 and 6 alone, I don't think is enough. That's a massive area. 1 for maybe 1 and 5 is okay because land-wise, you know, that can be done. But you know, what's that number? I don't know. We'll have to get into it in budget for sure. But as of right now, that's not possible. We just can't do that with 2 people, even if one is sick.
If I may add a little bit more, you know, through the chair to Councillor Palashi. Currently, we also found that the SAP requires them to do inspection 100% of the time, and you only have 2 staff. So what we would want to do is you actually take a look at the 100% to see if it's reasonable. What you don't want to do is continuously inspecting just one area. Mm-hmm. If you randomly inspect every single time it's different, then the contractor will be forced to act. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that we put in the recommendation, is just to reevaluate whether 100% is what you want to achieve. Right now they achieved the 81%, but very much delayed. If you said, okay, we are going to do 80% of inspections, but we want to do it right away, and because you pick and choose every time, so the contractors don't know which places you're going to go inspect, and they will have to, you know, change their behavior.
Absolutely, and that's not only then putting it on the taxpayers, it's putting it back on the contractors, right? So, you know, like if you're going to come to me and say in budget that we need to hire, you know, this many inspectors because we need to watch the contractors, well, maybe it's time to get new contractors, right?
There's a balance.
Like why do we have to put that on? That's the job that they were hired to do. That's the job that they have to do. If they're not doing their job properly, I think there's other contractors out there currently. Marlon.
Through the chair, that's very accurate. And then once we get the correct specifications done, it's easier to monitor and also take actions with the contractor.
The other issue that I've noticed and was mentioned in here is the flower beds, and you know, for a little while now, I think we've been picking and choosing which flower beds are getting done. Not all of them are being done on a yearly basis. So I don't know if that was captured in the audit or because that's flower beds, a lot of in-house stuff, right?
Correct. In the last 2 years, there's been a reduction and that was more based on the last 2 years. Staffing was at 50%, so we hit the highlighted, the irrigated beds for the most part, because they're a little less maintenance because they're getting watered. So we have reduced the last couple of years. The intent is to start planting all the beds again. That's correct.
Okay, so that's another discussion that we need to have to make sure that, you know, I'm sure every councillor wants their flower beds done, and I know a lot of those flower beds are actually private, and we have a standard of those privately owned ones, but ours personally, you know, I was disappointed to see that not a lot of them were done. I completely understand the reason, the rationale, COVID and stuff, but I think that's a standard that I actually heard door knocking this last election that hasn't been met, so people do want to get back to that.
Through the chair to Councillor Palashi, there is a related finding on the flower beds because the flower beds was not tracked by park, so that makes it difficult for staff to actually know that which flower beds is which with park, and you know. So if we correct that one as well, and it'll make it easier for staff to track which flower beds is with which park, and then to plan work accordingly. I believe that will help too.
You mean as which flower bed is with work, which park or division?
Which park? Like right now, one of the findings we have is in terms of the asset. Okay, the tracking of the asset right now is not quite accurate. We track flower beds, but we don't track it by which park. We have a total of how many flower beds, but we don't know which park has what flower beds.
Oh, okay.
So that makes it a little difficult for them to try to plan work, and that's one of the recommendations we're trying to have them,
Okay, good.
remediate.
Good. I think those were my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Paleshi. With Councillor Vasante.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So going back to what we're going to be, steps that we're taking on next, and recognizing that staff will be doing a phased approach to addressing these changes, would it be appropriate as part of our receipts and moving the recommendations in the report for this committee to see a report back every year to see how those changes are being implemented, and if that could be part of the motion for receipt and moving receipt of the report? Would that be appropriate, Ed?
Yeah. That's fair.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So I'll be moving that, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Just for me now, I just want to say to the audit committee, thanks for this audit and the detail put into it. I think it hit a lot of concerns that us as councillors are hearing from our residents when it comes to parks. And, as a business owner, tracking your assets is number one. So seeing that there's going to be some work getting done on that from a staff perspective, I think is good. I did have a couple questions myself, and maybe it's to the CAO. How long is remaining in the current contract of the people that we have cutting, or the contractors we have cutting the grass today?
I think it's 1 year.
Sorry?
To the chair, 1 year.
1 year remaining.
Yes, yes.
So when you speak about making those changes, does that mean that those changes will be implemented on the new contract cycle because we can't add them in now?
That's correct. It's happening right now when we go back out for the next.
So
next
we will
cycle.
be prepared
But,
to have those implemented by the time we go back out to tender for the next.
to the chair, yes, that's correct. And for the rest of this year, with additional inspections, we're going to try to keep the current contractor on schedule.
Okay, great, thank you. When we talk about the M5 system for tracking, and Ed, you had said that we're moving things that are manually put into this tracker, and we talked about there possibly being stuff being moved around. Does the M5, and I might have missed this when Councillor Paleshi was speaking, does the M5 system allow things to be moved and tracked?
Through the chair, personally, I don't know if it's to move them, but I think what it does, it gives us a base that monthly, at least, I know what I owned for follow-up inspections. You can move it ownership-wise, but if it's just being loaned, I don't know if that's something that's being done currently, and that's just being finalized. And to add a little piece to the M5, it runs our fleet system. I think it's even work orders and such, so it is a fleet-based system. But because it's something existing and established, that's why we're using that currently. We're moving towards that.
Right. Is there somebody in your department that is physically working on where our assets are as a city on a day-to-day basis?
Yes. Currently, it's under our supervisor administration. Under her direction currently, staff are working with fleet with the M5 system because this was done last August. So they've been working towards that last fall, and as we speak, to get that list organized.
Okay, because for me, I know as a business owner, one of the easiest ways to lose money is losing small tools.
Sure.
And that's something that's got to be tracked for sure. Yes, Marlon.
To the chair, moving from a paper system to electronic system, it is going to help. In the new reorg, we've actually got a dedicated asset management person, I believe, in the new reorg, if memory serves. But one of the other things too is also staff, and I know because on several weekends this past summer, I'm calling and myself moving benches and moving generators and stuff over. It's what happens on Monday morning is trying to track all those things that happen over the weekend. And in some cases, it's not that we're missing them, as Ed mentioned earlier. It's just that on Monday, certain items got missed when they got moved from one park to another in terms of picnic benches. Or in the case with the generator, what happened is our generator that was out wasn't working properly, so we had to pick one up from a different district and move it over, which fulfilled the service. However, it wasn't tracked on the Monday morning.
Right, so understandably, that stuff happens, but for me, if there's somebody who's in charge of that and that is their job, nothing's moving without an email. They come in Monday morning and they're implementing it, and we have somewhere that we can go
Yeah.
to say, hey, this was an issue and it's not being followed. Essentially, this is your job.
Yeah, there was no one dedicated to that role before, but now there will.
But now there will be. Okay, great. So I do not have any more questions. Oh, Councillor Pleshy is back on the board. Oh, sorry, Claire. Sorry,
Yes,
Councillor Pleshy.
to the chair. I was going to add something to your question in terms of earlier on Councillor Plashy's question on M5. I think the question that we're running into is whether M5 is outdated. To my understanding, most municipalities are still using M5 to track fleet, so I don't think that is the concern here. But I'm definitely going to take that down to work with my staff to see if there's a newer system. Like, for instance, the City of Toronto is still using M5. I think the finding we have is some of the assets were tracked manually. Some of the assets were tracking M5, and that's what And even if you have the latest technology in terms of tracking your system, you still need to do periodic inventory. And that's what we didn't find that the staff are doing. So if we could do a periodic inventory, we can locate where the machines or fleets, usually are, and that would solve the problem. So that's what I have there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll go back to that first then. Any system that we use is only as good as the information that we give it. So if M5 is a system, and it means nothing to me that other municipalities are using still M5, if there are better systems out there, great, fantastic. We should, definitely investigate and look into that. But that being said, if it's just a change instead of, implementing month-end asset checks for, if it's something as simple as that, then, then maybe. But if there's more as technology grows, if it, it continues to be a little bit cheaper in terms of utilizing systems that are out there that can help us, great. They're tracking systems, or so it's something I think that can definitely be looked at, and thanks, Claire, for that. I don't understand the report back checking yearly that Councillor Vincente is asking for. To me, then, that's saying that audit is going to start coming back and reviewing on a yearly basis, and I know that that's not what Councillor Vincente's intent is. But Ed, what does that mean to you, to come back on a yearly basis?
Through the chair, there's recommendations, and we have an action plan. That was my thought, but that's usually, I think updates come through audit. Would that be?
Like, this is here before us because audit did an audit.
Correct.
So, and obviously, if it wasn't captured directly through the department, it was captured through audit and that's the function and role of audit. So, but I'm not asking, and I don't think Councillor Vincente's intent is for audit to be reviewing and then coming back to council. Marlon.
Through the chair to Councillor Leshy, and I have the same thought as well. And my views are, and I was going to speak to that afterwards, was the fact that we will implement all the recommendations. We're also going to implement phase 1. And what I was going to speak to that about is we have a workshop just before the budget for 2024, and listen to council members as to how things are moving forward. If there's any questions or anything else we need to add, and we can deal with it that way. Same thing for snow clearing. I was thinking of a workshop as well at the end of the year, just before we do the next budget. So we can get comments and feedback coming back in, and we can update council at the same time as to what's been implemented. But nothing to do with audit coming back. We would be implementing all those recommendations.
Okay, so once all recommendations are implemented, you're going to come back and say everything's implemented.
Yes, and also take feedback from members of council as well.
Okay. And then you're gonna have a workshop?
I was thinking that would be done through a workshop process, or maybe just a presentation at council. I was still kind of thinking about how that would go, would roll out.
Okay, and then, previously on audit committee, we would get updates on to where are you in updating that process, and then once completed, that will still happen, Claire?
Through the chair, so Councillor Palacio, I was just going to address that. So we do have quarterly management action plan follow-up process. We'll come back, to tell you what are the number of recommendations outstanding, what have been implemented. So through that process, we could have a little bit of highlights in terms of parks, whether they be implemented. I looked at the management action plan. Response from staff is generally the implementation that is around Q2 2023. That was the intended. Now, I don't know if because they're losing staff and they're not able to get budget, if they are not, whether that management action plan timeline will be adjusted, but if it doesn't, in Q2 or Q3, the latest, we'll come back to see these are recommendations that's for parks and how many have been closed.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, we have a motion moved by Councillor Vicente that the report from Brad, Manager of Internal Audit, to the Audit Committee meeting of February 21, 2023 regarding Parks Maintenance Audit Report 2022 be received, and that Parks departmental staff be directed to report annually on the progress with respect to the findings. All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? That carries. That brings us to 5.6, which is being held until 11. So we would go to 6.1. Our next item is 6.1, a staff report titled Update of Internal Audit Charter of Audit Committee Terms of Reference. We also will have the related discussion item 8.1 regarding citizen members on audit committee. So is there do we have a presentation on this? There's no presentation, right? So this was held by Councillor Palacio. Are we good?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in reviewing this, it seems that a lot of maybe the possible changes were actually in effect not last term, but the term before, and then at some point that was changed, and now it looks like we're kind of changing them back, which is good. I'm glad to see that. What I did want to know, though, is what are some of the significant changes in the authority to the committee and the role of the Director of Audit?
If I may, through the chair, Councillor Palacio. There are only two changes highlighted in the report. One is the title of Chief Audit Executive. That was normally used by IIA to refer to the main role. Because we don't have a Chief Audit Executive, the Director is exactly that role. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to switch it so that we're consistent with which HR title. That's number one. That's the first change. The second change we're having is, if you look at the screen right now, it shows basically what they wanted to do is clarify audit committee's role in terms of hiring, firing, and the remuneration of the Director of Internal Audit. Basically, they are explaining that the audit committee will participate in the selection of the Director of Internal Audit and also actively participate in discussion about and proving decisions regarding the removal of the Director of Internal Audit. I believe there was an incident happened before, and so this was just making it what audit committee wants. And this was a report that carried forward from May last year. So I haven't really made any changes here, but it was made by the previous CAO in working with our acting director at that time. So this is the only change. There's no other changes.
I guess what what I don't fully understand is, and I was chair of audit when we implemented that back in 2014-18 term of council. And I don't recall that coming to committee or council to make that change of the CAOs or the lack of oversight by the committee and by council. I don't understand how that changed. I don't ever recall it coming to council to make that change. So what I'm confused about is why is it here, going back to the change that I personally spearheaded in 2014-15. I don't understand how we're just doing that again. I don't recall it ever being changed.
Okay, if I may.
So I'd like to know, sorry Claire, I'd like to know how that happened.
Okay, I'll just have, Richard said he may have a little bit background in it because I wasn't here until July. Okay.
Thank you, Claire.
I know there was an update presented through the audit committee in 2020. I wasn't acting director at the time, but I remember it going through that changed the wording of the terms of reference in the audit charter. So
I remember it now. Thank you, Richard. I actually do remember it now, and I spoke against it then, that change, yep. Okay. I know which councillor spearheaded that now. Some of the changes in here with respect to the authority, Peter, it states in here that it seems that committee has more authority than council on some of the decisions. And that's, I don't understand that. All committee will be recommendations to council, but yet it doesn't say that in here. Does it need to be said under the authority piece?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe in the terms of reference, it still says that the audit committee reports through to council. But you are quite correct that the audit committee does not have any delegated authority that this council or previous councils has delegated to the committee to act independently, such that, for example, its recommendations are approved without council approval. They still all require council approval. I think the discussion point, as Claire and Richard have pointed out, was what we'll call the sort of the level of independence by the internal audit function in terms of the ability for the audit committee to work directly with the director of internal audit to identify and conduct the audits and report through to this committee. So there is nothing that I'm aware of that explicitly says that this committee has delegated authority to act independently of council.
Okay, so before us on the screen now, should it not be incorporated in there somewhere that audit committee through council ratification or subject to council's approval? Or is that kind of covered in the Coles notes of it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe it's covered in the Coles notes. Appendix 3 speaks to the audit committee terms of reference, what they call the clean copy. And on the first page, it says meetings quarterly, reports to, it says city council. So maybe that's probably not as direct and clear, but that in clerk speak, it's council that makes the final decisions, not the audit committee.
Okay. The other question that I had, and I can't seem to pull it up, but what it essentially it said was that the Director of Internal Audit had the authority to, for any and all resources, including personnel, and I thought it had said that the Audit Committee delegates the authority to the Internal Auditor. I can't seem to pull it up where it was. Do you know what I'm talking about, Claire?
I think let's just pull up that point for you. If you look at the screen, that's I believe that's what you're thinking.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think there's a principle here that there needs to be some independence of the function of the internal audit. So it gives independence for the audit committee to authorize internal audit to do these things, including allocate resources. But it's allocating resources within an approved budget. It's not going beyond an approved budget because the internal audit function, like all the functions, is still accountable to council. You may recall from previous terms, there has been sort of a principle that the audit work plan, in many respects, is defined by the internal audit function and seldom is amended by council to give that sort of independence. And I think this is just part of that sort of principle of ensuring that there's some level of independence and accountability by the internal audit function so it can conduct its work without perception or otherwise of influence by other parts of the organization, which I know doesn't happen, but it's more perception than anything.
If I may add to, Peter is correct in terms of that audit committee education piece. And I wanted to just say that the reason that the director of internal audit need to have the independence in determining the work plan and then allocate resources to work on that is because the work plan needs to be risk-based rather than personal opinion from, certain council member. That's probably why the independence of the director of internal audit is there in the first place. Because if we work on project, risk-based project, and then we give the city the best, value in terms of,
Yeah,
what control
so,
needs to be.
and I don't disagree with you, I agree with you 100%. That being said, it's the committee that determines the work plan on the recommendations from yourself, right?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
And that still maintains?
Yes,
For sure.
absolutely. And then your recommendation goes forward to city council to get a final approval.
Yeah.
And that's why all of our reports, even when we have the recommendation, if it doesn't go through city council, it's not really effective until then. It has to
Right.
go through audit committee recommend it, city council approve it, and that's when it takes effect.
Okay. I think those were all my questions. That's 6.1, right? And have you connected, is it 8.1?
Yeah, we've 8.1 to deal with the members of the committee, the citizen members, the portion of the committee.
Okay.
And then there's a few motions
And
to,
you've added a discussion item on the citizen members?
correct.
Okay. So I'll reserve my questions to after your discussion.
So Peter, we're okay to move on to just the discussion item and then do all the motions at the same time? Okay, great. So, previous council on this committee was 7 members, and we've now went down to 5. Citizen members were 3 citizen members. So it is the will of the committee, I believe, in speaking with everybody who's on it, that we lower the, due to the fact that we went from 7 to 5, we're going to go ahead and go from 3 citizen members down to 2. And obviously, we'll be doing that through the Citizen Appointment Committee. I'm not sure if anybody else wants to speak to that. Councillor Plesher, are you okay with that? Okay. So that was all in that, and we'll capture it in the motion that will be coming up. I don't believe there's anything else, just the motions, right? Peter, could you just read through the motions?
So through you, Mr. Chair, so the 3 motions I understand are moved by yourself. I'll read them on the screen, whereas the first is dealing with the, which report 6.1 is dealing with, is to receive the report. Recommendations 2 and 3 of the staff report will be struck out and replaced with the following motion 1, whereas the audit committee was established to enable members of council to further enhance oversight, capabilities and stewardship responsibilities, and whereas the audit committee terms of reference details the composition of the audit committee as a minimum of 5 members. Members of council, the mayor, who's an ex officio member, a minimum of 1 to a maximum of 3 citizens, whereas the citizen members play an important role in the function of the audit committee, whereas the previous term of council appointed 7 members of council to the audit committee and 3 citizens who were recruited through the Citizen Appointments Committee, whereas this term of council appointed 5 members of council to the audit committee, and therefore be it resolved that 2 citizen members be recruited for the audit committee through the Citizen Appointments Committee. And I think if you just scroll down, Charlotte, to the red, I'm going to suggest instead of the last that the clerk be replaced, that the clerk be requested to post 2 vacancies on the audit committee as open for applications for citizens for a period of 3 weeks, as the clerk's office is currently recruiting for citizen applications for various council-established committees. So that'll replace number 2 there. Second motion speaks to the actual terms of reference and the audit charter. So whereas the audit committee terms of reference and audit charter are both used as guiding documents for the audit committee, whereas one guiding document will provide for efficiency and clarity on the mandate of the committee, therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to review the audit committee terms of reference and the audit charter and provide a draft version of a combined document to the next scheduled audit committee meeting that brings together the terms of reference and the charter. And then motion 3 is more of a sort of a workflow and reinforcing the principle of the independence of the internal audit function. Whereas council approved the internal audit charter states that the director of internal audit reports functionally to the audit committee and administratively to the CAO, whereas to assure that internal audit staff maintain an objective mindset and have sufficient authority to fulfill their duties, therefore be it resolved that any internal audit report directed to the audit committee by the director of internal audit shall not require prior approval by the chief administrative officer or other management staff, and that any process, including any electronic workflow processes, be modified accordingly. And those are the motions, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Looks good to me. So, and I can move that? Moved by myself. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion's carry. What time is it? So the other one is down until 11, so what would that bring us to? Our next item is 6.2, a staff report titled Corporate Fraud Prevention Hotline 2022 Yearly Update. This was held by Councillor Paletti.
So I'm glad that I held this, and it goes based off of what you had just said in terms of, the directing of the work plan. In one, your yearly update in your 2022 here, 69 cases reported in 2021, includes 41 cases referred to internal audit from Brampton City Council. And that goes back to exactly what you're saying. Brampton City Council directed audit to look into 41 cases, and I don't know how much of those 41 cases I can get into, but I know an apology was issued to an individual that that those 41 cases may have been about. I'm not sure how much I can get into. That being said, this is a prime example of when a council gets political and directs audit to do audits on an individual, and it turns out that it was, could I say, a complete waste of money. Now, I'd also like to say, how much did that cost? How much did that cost taxpayers, those 41 cases that were referred to internal audit by Brampton City Council?
I will let Richard speak. I do have something to speak to your question, but Richard can fill in with the numbers.
So, through the chair, 20 of those, we didn't investigate any of them. We did review them to see if there was something we should be looking into. 20 of them were allegations made towards either a member of council or that level, so they were referred to the integrity commissioner. The remaining 21 were, I don't remember all the details, but the majority of them would have been unrelated to the actual investigation. Mm-hmm. This was related to the Deloitte investigation. Yep. These were actually the cases that Deloitte didn't feel was within their sphere of responsibility. So for the most part, they were complaints against other internal management or staff. Mm-hmm. And we did review them. They were all human resource type issues. So there were no additional investigations or audit conducted based on those cases.
So Claire, and I know you wanted to comment, but what I want to ensure is that if if Brampton City Council decides, if council decides to get political in that manner again, what can you do as the Director of Internal Audit to say it's not within our purview? No other outside corporation is going to investigate anything that that council's directing. That all of everything that you're asking for should just go to the Integrity Commissioner or the Ombudsman.
If I may, through the chair, Councillor Palashi, that's actually one of the areas I was going to address. So I want to make two distinctions. One is, what is our jurisdiction for, as the way that our current audit shop is set up, so that we can only deal with management matters, okay, and including the boards. Okay, that's the only thing. We don't have jurisdiction over City Council. So let me give you an example. For instance, at one of the committee of councils that we were referred to do an audit on Beauvais Barn. Now, because it involves a previous city councilor, it's going to get messy from our point of view. So we have, I've spoken to Marlon, and Marlon totally agrees. And in fact, he has the same idea when we both spoke at the same time. I said, well, we have to contract that out. So we have contract out. So that's going to be done by an outside party. And we looked at, we've contracted, there's only one firm responded to us. So we've repackaged it, and we want to attract a few more, just value for value, value for money. So it's going to come back in September audit committee. That's for sure. Okay, that's number one. The second thing I was going to speak that was going to make a little bit distinction is it's different between the fraud matters and internal audit matters. Now, our audit work plan only address audit. Now, when you refer us to a fraud matter, let's just say if it's not involving a top, like city commissioner or the CEO or councilors, then we could do that. I probably, because right now we don't have anybody actually allocated in terms of fraud matters. We requested 2 positions, and you will see in the budget, there's 2 positions, but those 2 positions are actually not for investigation purposes, but just for triaging preliminary assessment so that we can manage and also provide some advice for city to do certain investigations, okay? If we are going to do full-fledged investigation itself could take 1 year or even more than 1 year with a 2 or 3 team member, because they can get very complex. Now, sometimes they only take a couple of months. It depends on the nature of the investigation, right? So the audit work plan, we would definitely like to keep the independence. Now, in terms of fraud matters referred to us, we are obligated to take it on. Now, if it is not something that we can deal with, we will go out and do RFP. So that's, I hope that I answered the questions.
For sure. So, and I was part of audit when we first implemented the hotline. In here it has a valuation, I think it's $16,000 currently to manage the hotline today.
Yes, that's just the intake service. That's what
that
annual
is
intake service.
And that's outsourced.
That's outsourced.
Right?
And we renewed it again, and the same vendor has won the RFP.
Okay.
So that was really good. But we're talking about investigation piece, which means you have the intake, but they just give us all this list. We receive an email, bounce back from them. We are the one that have to be obligated to deal with them, which means I have to do a preliminary assessment to see whether do we investigate. Do we think there's merit to investigate? Do we think that the matter is important enough for the internal audit to undertake the investigation, or do we think that the management is best at investigating it? For instance, if you have time theft from an employee, the best person to look at it is the immediate supervisor and the management. Then in this case, we will refer them back. If we don't feel like there's a implication for the city as whole, we probably say, we'll refer back to the management, there's no reporting back required. However, let's just give you another instance. We know there's a P-card fraud case. We already know it's substantiated. Now, there's impact on the city because everybody uses P-card. We want to make sure the city are not repeating the mistake. And then what we're going to do is we're undertaking an audit just to get at the extent of the non-compliance with our policies in terms of P-card usage, right? That's different. Now, sometimes there's investigations we want to undertake because it does have impact on the city. It's not just the audit. We will do that too. But we probably have to move the audit people, my staff, to the fraud side just to deal with it.
Okay, and so there's no, from that outside organization, there's no management of each individual case. Once they provide us with the information, it's up to us
That's it.
to do the full investigation. And is the anonymity still there from, do we ever receive, I guess we must, but I'll ask the question, do we know who the investigation person is once that's sent to us?
Yes.
We
We will keep track, so we will manage as a whole. We know exactly this is the case, right? So we know exactly which case has been deemed as worthy of investigating, and we know who is investigating. And if we think there's no reporting back required, then we don't know the result. We don't want to know the result. But if we said reporting back to us, we would know the result. We know how much is substantiated. And if we're investigating ourselves, we would know a conclusion as well. If we're investigating ourselves, you are likely to see a report, because that means that case, to me, it is worth the council's attention. That's why we're investigating it. You will very much likely to see a P-card audit report this coming year.
I'll get into P-card in a second, but I just want to make sure, the individual that is phoning the hotline to report,
we don't know.
We don't know who that is.
That's anonymous. However,
Yes.
I wanted to say that we're not Auditor General's office. We're obligated to release some of the files according to FIFA requirement. If they don't meet any certain confidentiality requirement, at a later date, it will be released. But if we're Auditor General's office, we could maintain our working papers unless there's a criminal proceeding that's out there, require us to give out the information. So it is more secure if it's the Auditor General's office in terms of who reported what. But other than that, we try to keep the anonymity of all people that's come forward to report to us, because that's the only way to guarantee they will come back again for questions.
Okay, but we don't have what do you mean by the Auditor General's office?
We don't. We're just saying that here, if there's a FIFA request, if they meet the FIFA requirement, they want us to release who's reporting to us, we probably have to release at a certain date. So Richard wants that.
Okay, Richard.
Through the chair. So unless at a certain point in the investigation, the identity of the individual is released to us, we don't have it. So the vendor doesn't track who the person is. They don't even track the IP address that logged the case.
Okay.
So we can't track them that way.
Okay.
And it's an option. They may disclose their identity if they so wish to, but if they don't, then we'll, unless, again, they're to disclose it at some point in the process, then we won't know. And even if we are subject to FIFA, to a freedom of information request,
Yep.
they wouldn't have, we don't have the means to retrieve that name.
Okay,
So they're
good.
protected if they so choose to remain anonymous.
Okay. I had another question, but I forgot what it was. Back to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing any other questions unless Councillor Pelletier remembers his last one. We have a motion by Councillor Pelletier to receive the report. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. So that will bring us back to 5.6, which is the staff presentation regarding the user fee audit. We did hold this down until 11 o'clock to wait for Lindsay Tedds. Lindsay Tedds, I've been notified by the clerk that Lindsay is online. So just for committee, if you will indulge me, I just give background on Lindsay. Lindsay Tedds is here to answer any questions that we have about the report. She's a specialist in economic analyst of tax policy with a particular focus on the design and implementation of tax policy, including municipal user fees and regulatory charges in Canada. She's one of Canada's foremost academic experts on the Canadian user levies, a tenured associate professor for the University of Calgary, first-hand experience with designing and conducting both specific and comprehensive user fee reviews, on-hand experience working with government officials to design and implement public policy initiatives. So we do thank Lindsay for being here with us today to answer any questions. But I will turn it over to Claire, I believe, who will be doing the staff presentation on this.
I will pass it to the audit lead, Rushir Patel. Thanks, Rushir, for taking us through this audit.
Hey, good morning. I'll be doing the presentation for user fee audit. My name is Richard Patel. I'm audit manager with the office. And if you can kindly go to slide number 2. I mean, this slide speaks to the need why, city needs to have a good user fee policy. City's long-term sustainability depends on its ability to generate sufficient revenue, and we know that we have lots of challenges in the city. We've got a lot of capital projects. We have to maintain long-term assets. There are replacement costs. The inflation costs are high, and our development revenues, for instance, are not keeping up with the inflation. So these are the challenges the city faces. And if you move to next slide. And there's some of the challenges which explains why city has only 2 meaningful sources of revenue: property tax and user fee. They are the 2 sources. We don't have additional revenue tools like some other cities have, bigger cities. For example, land transfer tax, municipal sales tax, vehicles tax, etc. Those tools are not available to us. So we have to lean back to either property tax or user fee for most of our revenues. And if we can jump 2 slides, I will take to the table. This table shows the trend. Last 6 years, it gives you 2 key information. One is the user fee as percentage of total revenue, and then property tax as a percentage of total revenue. So you can see that roughly 28% of cities' total revenue is generated from user fees. And property tax contributes 66% of total revenue. Now, this trend has been pretty stable, from 25% to 28% over the last 6 years. There's not been a meaningful increase. And the reason this chart is important is in the next slide, we'll show the trend. In the Canadian municipalities, there has been a trend over the last many years. The reliance on user fee is increasing and reliance on property tax is decreasing. So this speaks to 2 data points, 1998 and 2016. So we can see from this chart that the reliance on user fee is increasing and reliance on property taxes is decreasing. So in 1998, this is survey done for major Canadian municipalities. About 22% of the revenue in 1998 was coming from user fee, and that percentage has gone up to 37%. So what it means is 37 cents of every dollar in revenue is generated from user fees. Now, in the previous slide, we saw that the trend in Brampton's been pretty consistent, 28%. So we have not kept up with, this trend that's been seen in Canada, where user fee is kind of like the bigger contributor now. Not compared to property tax, of course, but the percentage is going up. So next slide, please. So this slide speaks to our audit, what it was focused on. So we looked at 3 things. We looked at whether city has a user fee policy and a framework to ensure consistency in establishing and administering the city's user fee programs and to provide guidance on cost recovery. The second objective was whether city has the standard operating procedures for deciding the fees, various fees, user fee rates, and whether those SOPs are complied with. And our third objective was to see if there are policies and procedures in place to approve exceptions to full cost recovery and for waivers and exemptions, and whether such policies are followed. We picked 4 divisions: recreation, parks, development services, fire and emergency. So we had 2 big divisions, recreation, development services contributing 22 million and 9 million respectively to user fee base. And then we had 2 smaller divisions, parks and fire and emergency. Next one. So our finding number 1 was that there's a lack of comprehensive user fee framework. City does not have a comprehensive user fee framework to ensure consistency in setting and administering the user fee programs and cost recovery. And historically, all user fees have been set and managed without a clear set of common principles. So when we talk about a comprehensive user fee frameworks, there are a lot of requirements a good framework should have. Good framework should have a provision for full cost determination. It should have provision for all the direct, indirect cost and capital cost be accounted for, even though it's not necessary for each user fee program that 100% of the cost should be recovered. Even if you don't recover 100%, you still need to know what your base is. So that's the requirement for a comprehensive user fee program or a framework. And then it of course provides for subsidies, waivers, exemptions, the rules around that. It provides for periodic reviews, comprehensive user fee reviews, and such things. Next slide, please. Okay, so our second finding is that most divisions that we audited did not, determine the full cost of user fee, meaning the basis for setting user fee is not clear. Rationale or the cost analysis for fees charged for various programs not documented. The 4 programs that we audited did not consider indirect cost and capital cost when setting user fees. There's no coordinated approach to determine and allocate corporate overheads to divisions for assessing full cost of service and setting user fees. As a result, we believe that there is a significant risk that city is undercharging for these services. Next slide, please. Again, this finding number 3 relates to the comprehensive user fee framework. One of the requirements is that every so often there should be a comprehensive user fee study, right? So every 5 years, 4 years, arbitrary period, but you go back and look at the program, look at different aspects of the program, elements that affect the fees, costs, and then come back with a comprehensive result and revaluation of the program. So that comprehensive user fee study has not been done in the city in the last 5 years. The annual updates have been very limited and been primarily focused on inflation adjustments. And there is very little information provided to council, to educate them as to, the changes and the developments which affect the user fee costs. Next slide, please. And this brings us to the most important section in the audit report, which is development services. So we did a little bit more of a deep dive in this area. So we did some quantification. We compared, different jurisdictions, what they are charging for major application types. We looked at Toronto, Mississauga, Markham, and Hamilton. And when we compared the user fee charged for major fee, the applications, we found that City of Brampton's 2021 base fee is significantly lower compared to the average. And there's a couple columns that try to quantify in percentage. For example, for one fee category, we are 84% less than the average. For the other one, we are 73% less than what others charge. And when we use the volumes from last 3 years, application volumes, if we quantify, we apply the average, what others charge versus what we charge, the difference comes to $3.4 million. So potentially what we are saying is if our fee were same as everybody else's, we would be generating 3.4 million more. So that's what we are undercharging right now, potentially, compared to what others charge. Next slide, please. And this table is, what it does is it compares the Brampton's current fee structure and it applies various percentage increases to that base fee level that we have right now. And then we try to quantify how much extra revenue we can generate if we were to increase the Brampton's current user fee by 100%, 75%, or 25%. So we can see, I'll just focus on 100% increase. So if we were to double what we are charging now, as 2021 base, we'd be generating 2.3 million more than what we're generating now. And now, even if we were to increase 100%, which is 2.3 million additional revenue, would still be below what everybody else charges and below what our actual cost is. Next slide, please. And this slide, it tries to quantify the amount of subsidy we are providing to users as far as the development services charge is concerned. So what we've done is we've taken the direct cost that was provided to us by division. These direct costs were calculated by a consultant that city hired or the division hired a couple of years back. And based on that direct cost calculation, and then we applied overhead and the total cost. So we calculated the total direct cost and the total cost including indirect cost, and we compared what we are charging. And if you look at just on the direct cost basis, there's significant subsidy that we provide. The subsidy ranges from 82% on the higher end to 30% on the lower end. What it means is, we're only recovering about, if you take the difference, 70 cents to 18 cents of, the total.
If I may just to add a little bit, this is after we've raised the fee by 100%. Then we're comparing to the direct cost. Okay.
Yes. So essentially, this chart shows the amount of subsidy we have been providing, and it clearly demonstrates that we are not recovering our direct costs even after we increase 100% the fee by 100%, right? So we're not recovering our direct costs. If you add indirect costs to that, the subsidy is even higher. So what we're saying in summary is, if we were to increase today our fee by 100%, would still not be recovering our direct cost entirely. And then there's, of course, indirect cost that really makes it very skewed. Next slide, please. So this is a summary again, 3.4 million in potential revenue based on average application volumes when we compare Brampton versus other jurisdictions. If we were to increase by 100%, 2.3 million additional revenue is possible. Even with 100% increase, would still be below what other municipalities charge on average and not recover the full cost of service. Again, the next 2 points we already spoken about, so I'll just jump to next slide. So our recommendations, we have 6 recommendations. The first one, of course, is to implement comprehensive user fee framework, and again, program-specific user fee policies. And then we're asking divisions to do full cost service determination, cost of service, as a starting point for setting the user fees. And then every time they provide any subsidies or when they're not setting the user fee at 100%, provide a rationale for that and document that rationale. And conduct and present to City Council a comprehensive user fee study every 4 years, and then provide annual updates, which will deal with all the service delivery changes, benchmarking information, additional opportunities for user fee. And then the last recommendation is evaluate the feasibility of raising the development services user fee through a comprehensive user fee study. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very detailed report, so thank you for that. I do know that in planning, the last planning meeting, I believe there was some fees that were already being increased in the development side, but I believe it was only one portion of it. So we do know on council that we need to be looking at that as a whole. But when you see the numbers of how low we are and what we can be making, those numbers are staggering, right? So I have a couple of questions, if that's okay, Councilor Vicente, before I throw it to you. When we're talking about setting up the framework for reviewing the user fees, is that across the city for all user fees or specifically for the 4 that were chosen for this audit?
So the framework is, it's a policy citywide. So basically what it does is it gives the elements of what should be in a typical user fee program, and it's citywide. It's a direction from the city through policy to all divisions, and then division will basically adhere to that policy and framework. So it's a citywide thing.
Okay. My next question goes to the implementation of increasing our costs, depending on where we're increasing those costs within the city. Would it be fair to say that we would look at implementing it over time to catch up to other municipalities or other fees that are, or municipalities of same size to get us there? I know if we increase it 100%, we would be up to $2-point-something million in extra revenue. So my question is that 100% an implementation of today? And what is the total percentage? So 100% would get us there. What is the total percentage of increase where we need to get to kind of catch up? Can you understand what I'm saying? And Claire, if you would like.
Yes, through the chair, if I may, on this subject. So I think currently, if you raise it by 100%, it's very safe to say that we are not going to be exceeding our direct cost or, 100% of the total cost. And that's why it's very safe for you to raise it to that point. As to how long does it take for city council and the management working together to raise it, that really depends on two things. One is your policy towards developers, and the second thing is, what is the city's budget situation? Let's say your city is really having a tough time balancing the budget, you might want to raise it faster. But if your policy it is so that to attract a lot of developer to the city, then you might want to move to the other side a little bit. So it really entirely depends on you. Then I wanted to add to a little bit the question that you asked before in terms of, do we do a comprehensive, so there's three terminology mentioned in this report. One is a comprehensive user fee framework, which is a policy that's citywide that governs all of the user fee programs, right? It's a very high level policy. We want that to be done. Probably the best leadership can be taken is probably from the CAO's office in consultation with the finance. But then we want every program to have a comprehensive user fee study, because they have not had it in the last 5 years. Because that will be a base, that will identify what are the existing user fees, how do they compare to other cities, and what, how much are we recovering, what is the full cost. And that needs to be done once every 4 years in a way that so that every city council in their 4-year term, they will at least be educated once, just to go forward. And then we mentioned another terminology, which is a periodic update. That periodic update is not as comprehensive as the user fee study, but what we would like to do is year over year, you highlight the difference in terms of inflation, changes of program delivery, what other cities have been, in terms of benchmarking, are we falling behind, are we catching up, So those are the periodic fee update. That's better to be led probably by, or consolidated by finance, but in consultation with all the user fee program area. Now, I would think that right now, development services has the biggest opportunity to increase its fees. So I would say give some priorities to development services. And what we could do is, after a few years, 2 years minimum, to give staff opportunity to put together a comprehensive user fee framework for the city and do comprehensive fee study, and then we can come back to get the rest of the user fee program. That's one way that we can do it.
Marlon?
To you, Chair, in answer to your question, and further to what Claire just says, once we finish that comprehensive user fee study, we can determine what the cost of those services are. So that the simple answer to your question is, some of those fees can be raised in total immediately, and some will be phased in over a period of time.
What are we looking at for timeline on getting that back? Like roughly, is that something that's going to take us quite some time? I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, are we implementing, based on the last committee meeting for planning, that fee, that increased the fee to $5,000 for, what was that for?
Pre-consultation.
Pre-consultation. Is that being implemented right away?
Immediately,
Okay, so that obviously is part of this, but,
yes.
okay, well, so anything that we're tearing up will come after that?
We'll come after that, exactly.
Okay. But we don't have a timeline on how long it's gonna take to get that comprehensive study
That's
done?
clear. We're going to be moving on that as soon as possible.
Okay. And I guess development in the planning department is the majority of where this comes from. What is what would you say is second to that?
We've only looked at the 4. I would say maybe, I think in terms of, we have one slide that really kept all the divisions. That was the last slide on where they stand. I would say we actually have, if you want to go to the last slides, this one, yeah, the table. This table kind of summarizes the 4 divisions that we've been to, the 4 user fee program areas, who's doing better, who has most of the elements, who has less elements. Just from these 4, I think it's hard to say because there may be other part of the city that still have user fee, a large amount of user fee that we haven't been to. So, but the only answer right now we can give is within the 4 divisions.
Yeah. And I know we discussed recreation at council and increasing the fee, and, you know, sometimes it's not about being the same as other municipalities. It's doing what's right for the residents of Brampton. So when we look at recreation,
Yes.
Quite frankly, I don't care what Vaughan or Mississauga or other places are charging. I want good service and great recreation that's affordable for our residents here in Brampton. So obviously we'll look at that, but, you know, I don't think that we should be paying for development costs. Our taxpayers should be paying for that, right? So I definitely want to look at that. But yeah, no, this was a very in-depth and great audit report. So I do appreciate that from the entire team. I'm not seeing any other questions that are on the board. So I guess we can go ahead and move this. So I do have a motion moved by Councillor Vicente that the presentation from Mr. Patel, manager, you moved it, I was reading it, sorry. As we get it back. Manager of Internal Audit and Claire, the Director of Internal Audit, to the Audit Committee meeting of February 21, 2022, be it that the user fee audit be received. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. So I believe our next item may be our last item, and it would be our closed session item, which is 11.1. So I need to get a motion to move into closed, right?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Just before that, there is section 9, which is question period, for member question period. So if any members have any questions on matters within the
Section
audit
9?
committee. Yep.
Okay, next item is member question period. Do any members have any questions regarding the community service?
That's a mistake.
That's a mistake for sure.
Audit committee.
The audit, I was reading it like that's not right. The audit committee meeting. Seeing none.
Mr. Chair, the next is section 10, public question period. Are there any members of the public that have any questions regarding business conducted on today's audit committee? I don't see any in chambers. I'm just going to check online if there's any questions.
If I may, there's, I think the development services staff were just here. I know we closed that item, but they do want to stress that all of the fees were increased by 25% with exception of that particular fee that was raised to $5,000, which the current rate is actually around $600. So that was a giant jump, but we're recommending a little bit beyond that. So
Thank you.
There are no public questions in the clerk's inbox, so the next item is item 11. There's only one item to go into closed, item 11.1, security of the property of the municipality, a corporate infrastructure matter.
Okay, and how long do you need? 10 minutes?
Yes, we'll just need a mover of the motion and then just a vote to move into close, please.
Okay. So I have a motion moved by Councilor Vicente to move into closed session to deal with that item. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries. So now we have to go, what do you need, 10 minutes?
Through you, Mr. Chair, 10 minutes would be appropriate, yes, thank you.
Okay, welcome back to open session. And Peter, can you summarize the closed session, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to members of committee, Audit Committee moved into closed session today for 11.1 only. Security of the property of the municipality, a corporate infrastructure matter. This matter was considered, information was received, and no direction was given. And that's the report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And next we have adjournment. Our last item of business. Our next committee meeting will be scheduled later this spring, and remaining quarterly meetings will be scheduled for 2023 based on a consultation with the Director of Audit and the Clerk's Office. I have a motion moved by Councillor Tour to adjourn today's meeting. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries.